Well, on behalf of everyone present and even everyone listening at some future date, I would like to welcome everyone to the users group meeting. The first thing that I want to do is actually assure people that we are going to do our very best to keep this to a manageable time. I know that our last two users group meetings have gone over 3 hours, and that's a long time for almost everyone. So again, we're going to do our best. There is a lot of information, and I want to really encourage everyone to take good notes. And if you have questions, of course you can ask them now, but you are also welcome to take notes, think about whatever topic is being discussed, and send emails later on to obtain additional information or to share your opinion or something like that, if that's what you feel most comfortable with. And as always, if you want to share your opinion or ask a question, but want to do so anonymously, you can use the chat feature of the Zoom to send me a direct message, and I will ask that question or share that opinion anonymously, I promise. So you can do that if you'd like to do that at some time during this meeting. So the second thing that I'll do is ask someone to move that we adopt the agenda that has been sent to us by Kendall. Would anyone like to move that?
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Melissa. Do we have a second?
I second.
I heard from Stephanie Geitz, I'm sorry, Stephanie, that we have a second. So all in favor of adopting the agenda, please say aye.
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 Excellent. I heard some, and I think Kendall has muted everyone else. So we're going to go ahead and adopt the agenda. I hope everyone has had a chance to review the minutes from our previous meeting in August. Does anyone have any questions, concerns, or corrections about the minutes? Anyone at all? I would like to thank Anna and her colleagues for taking such good minutes. And as you will notice, as I hope everyone has noticed, Anna and her colleagues are starting kind of a new thing about not necessarily typing out the conversations verbatim, but as you can see on the screen here with item number 2, telling us where that specific topic starts discussing. And so you can actually hear the complete conversation in the recording. I think that's a great alternative. And thank you, Anna, and your staff for starting to do that. Well, I don't have any messages in the chat and I'm not hearing anything. So would someone like to, Joel Shoemaker. Now let's get Joel's full name in the minutes, of course. Joel Shoemaker moves to approve. Thank you very much, Joel. Do I have a second? And Mary Elmer seconds it. Thank you, Mary. All in favor of adopting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oh, it's almost a chorus. Fantastic. We sound so good, folks. We're really sounding good together. We have, I think those are the steps. Kendall, have I missed anything for that section? Nope. Okay, at this time, I would like to introduce Alyssa Williams. She is the president of the RSA Board of Directors, and she's gonna share with us the report. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Thank you, Laura. At yesterday's RSA board meeting, the board approved a budget increase. So in what our fees to members will be. So Kendall will be talking more about that later in our agenda with more detail, but just know that your RSA fees will be going up in the following fiscal year. The board spent a lot of time discussing the future of RSA and what that looks like in conjunction with the member services level committee work and just information we have now about sustainability and RSA staff independence from Rails. And both the board members and the member services committee do see the need for some type of mentoring between different areas of expertise and newer directors or newer members to the system. So that is definitely something we hope to continue to suss out and figure out how to implement in the coming year. It will take a while to implement. So, but we had a really good discussion on what the future of Rails can and should and could look like. And I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that if you read the minutes in the member services levels committee. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Alyssa. Kendall, I will turn it over to you to go over the committee reports briefly before in this section of committee reports.
Sure. So the committee reports were all combined into one document, and that was one of the documents that was, well, it's currently linked on the users group page on our website for this meeting, and also was linked in the email that went out. So if anyone has any questions about any of the notes, please ask them now. Or if you come across something later that you have a question on, you can email whoever is responsible for the committee. I will say that the reports committee will be restarting next year. We'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Well, I'm not seeing any questions coming through.
Lovely. That's why we try and get all this stuff out early in case anybody has any questions about it.
Excellent. So go ahead, Kendall, you and your staff can take the next section as well.
Sure. So of all of the other documents that we attached to the meeting page and the emails that went out, the written package, and this goes back a couple of years when everyone had asked for all the materials a good week prior to users group. Everything except for the two documents in black will be discussed later in this meeting. So if you have a question about parameters that were added or new training videos out on YouTube, great. If not, we can move on. I have no chats.
Ditto. Let's move on. And of course, if something comes in, we can always retrace our steps briefly.
All right. So I'll start off here with a little bit of staffing news. Jane Bradbury resigned her position to go take a job working with kids and books. She was very excited to get back out into the world of working with people. Every day she had expressed that desire pretty much from when she started working with us, that she was, kind of missing working with people. And so she has moved on. And with her leaving, we were able to reevaluate the entire cataloging department as a whole and try and decide what is the best way to use this position. So the position that Jane filled was actually created 12 years ago or so when we hired Erica. And that was actually the first cataloging specific position we actually added to RSA. And it was intended to be more of a database cleanup type of position. The cataloging department has since expanded and taken on a lot more responsibility and is doing a lot more work. We felt this was a good time to increase that position to a full coordinator position rather than a specialist position, so that we will have 4 people who can do original cataloging and all the other types of things that Lisa and Rhonda and Jennifer are doing for us now. So that position was posted out on the Rails website and you can apply through 19 November. It's like close of business or midnight or something on the 19th. We will try and do interviews the first or second week of December with the hopes that if we can find someone qualified, that we can get them starting in January. And as a note, we have relaxed the qualifications somewhat for the position to allow for people who are coming directly out of school with either an LTA or an MLS type degree that took cataloging courses in college and want to get into the cataloging world. We are encouraging those folks to apply as well. Not just, people who have been cataloging for the last 20 years or whatever. So we do training here, quite a lot of training. So if you're interested, please see the Rails website or the ILA website or the ALA website or one or two other places. Honestly, going to the Rails website jobs board is your quickest way to get to that ad. And we'll put reminders out on the listserv once or twice more before the 19th. So do we have any questions about that? Take my phone out of my pocket because it is buzzing. All right. Okay, one of the documents that was included in the package was about trying to define out what policies and standards or procedures are. And I think this will start becoming very, very clear as we move forward and start really working on designing a website. We were confused about these terms. You guys are confused about these terms. Looking back at all of the documents that have been voted and approved and are currently in force in RSA, the term standard, policy, and procedure was used interchangeably in the past. And so users group or the board or previous governing bodies dating back to the 1990s have approved all three of those types of documents. But that doesn't really help when we start trying to name newer documents or follow on support documents for a particular task or item or thought process. So we said, you know what, while we have to touch every document we own to post it on the new website anyway, this is a good time to try and clarify our naming of policies and standards and procedures and whatnot, so that we can group all these things together and make them much easier to find rather than having to click around on different pages to get, the three different documents that you need on a particular thing. And while we were doing that, what we wanted to do was actually clarify what a policy is and what a standard is, and then below that, what a procedure is, what a cheat sheet is, and what a guide is. And so in our bylaws, there is a and the actual section of the bylaws is laid out in the memo. But in the bylaws, it basically says policies are the things that the RSA board or the approves or the RSA board forwards to users group to approve. And in practice, pretty much all operational type policies are, just handled by users group. But that is the key to the word policy. The word policy means that has been voted and approved by a governing body. And policies are how things should work, not how they do work, but how they should work. So a policy is a statement of intent to set organizational goals or objectives or culture. And those are very formal sets of rules, not procedures, not how we get to something, but what we want something to be. So a little bit later, we're going to be talking about reciprocity, and we do have a reciprocity policy in effect now. That's actually the reciprocity policy plus the reciprocity standard plus a little bit of reciprocity procedure all in one document. The reciprocity policy should be what is the goal and intent of RSA's reciprocity, right? That should be what our policy is. The standard is how do you implement the the policy, or how do you implement a goal, or how do we implement something that's in our strategic plan, right? That's the kind of top level of guidance on how you do something. And so again, these are courses of action that support a strat plan, the policy, the formal rules, to make sure that things can be implemented the best way the system can implement them. That doesn't mean the system can implement a policy 100%. Reciprocity is a great example of that. The system cannot implement reciprocity 100% with our current setup, and not without a lot of changes on our part. But the standard could be, this is how you do it. And then below policy and standard, then you have your step-by-step guides. So again, kind of top level policy. Anybody can help create a policy, subcommittees, the board, users group. Again, these are things that are approved at this level. Standards, again, those are things that can be created by anyone, but it's RSA staff that says, yes, this is the best way to implement whatever it is we're trying to implement, because honestly, we're the ones who know. Procedures are a step down from standards. That's your kind of day-to-day guide of how to do things. Again, these can be created by, generally, these are created by RSA staff or subcommittees, right? Because subcommittees sometimes get really deep into the weeds. Cheat sheets are those little 2-page jobby things that you can print out and put next to your computer to remind you of things. And then guides created by RSA are kind of the backdrop. Why are item types important? Might be a guide. And that would be a guide that's about 40 pages long, because item types control everything in our system. So it'd be a very long guide. And then even below all of that, we just have reminder emails. Those are not formally in anything, but y'all know, you see them. So I figured I'd throw them on there. So do any of you have any questions about what our kind of layout of documentation moving forward is? And I will tell you that anything that is currently in practice, that has been approved by any governing body, will be renamed as a policy as we put it out on the new website, even if it's a policy standard procedure. Some of these things that have been approved are almost cheat sheets. They're incredibly small, and right click here and type this thing in the box and click the X, and those were approved. So those are currently policy in standards. And then as we go back and we start redoing things, we'll look at policies and we'll say, hey, what was the intent of the policy? Let's pass that as a policy. And then below that, we'll create a standard on how to implement that policy. That way, when we get a new toy in the system, or there's a significant system upgrade that changes functionality, we don't have to go back to a governing body just to change how you do something when it has no impact on the actual policy.
Kendall, I'd like to thank you for giving us not only these good definitions, which of course will be discussed, in the future, but also this visual. This visual is actually very helpful, and I imagine it might even be helpful for some of us who occasionally have this conversation with either our staff or perhaps our trustees. What is the difference between a policy and a procedure? Or some of you might use the word, a standard within your own library. And so this visual could be a very helpful tool for some of our library directors out there when having similar discussions with their own trustees or staff. So thank you.
You are welcome. All right. Now we will turn it over to Anna, so I don't have to talk anymore.
All right. So making sure I'm actually unmuted. Yes. Okay. So the institutional card standard, Kendall, do you have that on yours to pull up, or should I grab it?
I can pull that up. Hold on.
Okay. Thank you.
No, that's school. Here we go.
There we go. Okay, so we've had just over the years various questions and problems, and this is just sort of one of those things that we didn't really have laid out. And the situation in which this usually comes up is sometimes that we'll find out that a library has been like using another library's D1500 account to like check out materials to their local school or something like that. And just to be clear, that is not what the D1500s are for. The D1500s are to, you know, do ILL stuff basically, or occasionally send back a weird problem item or things of that nature. But the idea is that we know that you sometimes do have local entities with which you have a relationship of some sort that falls sort of outside of the normal purview of this is an individual resident who wants a card, or this is an individual teacher who wants to check things out for their school, or this is someone with whom we have a more formal outreach arrangement, or we don't have an IGA, but we are comfortable with having a agreement of varying degrees of formality with this institution, that this institution will reimburse us for lost items. And so we are comfortable letting them use our collection, basically. We've had a user profile named Inst in the system for presumably a really long time, which is used with more or less degree of frequency. It seems like there's also probably a fair amount of accounts out there that may kind of fit this criteria that are probably not named Inst, you know, not using that profile. But we kind of wanted to outline sort of the intent of this type of card and sort of what the limitations on that would be. And so this is, again, is kind of, the intent is to allow you to sort of issue a card that you would not normally, that doesn't normally fit into the rules. So that is why there are limitations like you may use this card to place holds on your own materials. You may use this card to check out your own materials, but this card would not be something that you would, you know, be doing a lot of, you know, hold, you know, placing on. And in general, you know, some of the libraries that we've interacted with who are using this type of thing, they don't, you know, a representative from the school doesn't even necessarily have a copy of the card. They don't have the pin. So, you know, holds, and there's a level of kind of mediation by library staff going on here. You probably do, you know, you may want to have some kind of formal agreement about like who at the institution can access the card or something like that. But it was just sort of one of those things where it's sort of been an informal thing that some people have done, and also a thing that people have done, quote, I'm going to say quote, wrong, but I can't really say wrong because there wasn't a standard or any guidance out there before. So this is kind of our first stab at this. So this might be something that ends up getting edited and adjusted as we go. But basically, this is sort of accounts that aren't really part of the limitation of why we're kind of limiting this to like your library's items, is because this is something you're making a decision that I am going to permit this for my library. But that because these sort of exist outside of the other, you know, anything in the admin code or something, this is a decision that you are making internally. You are not obligated to start using institutional cards in your community if that's not something, you know, you want to do. This is not something that's covered by the admin code. This is I have decided that I want to let this daycare, you know, check out these books or something like that, or I want to work with my local school to do this. There are definitely edge cases, as Kendall and I were talking about yesterday, and things, you know, where it's kind of like, okay, no, in that situation, that teacher should just get a teacher card. In that situation, that's actually an outreach account. That's actually some other type of thing. If you ever do have one where you're just kind of like, I don't know what profile to use, I have this weird program that I want to start, feel free to just give us a call. I am always happy to kind of jaw over those accounts and go next door and bug Kendall and make him jaw over them with me and try to figure out kind of what the best use. Jane just asked, she doesn't see Inst as a profile name. It hasn't been in very common use, so it may be missing from a lot of your user profile drop-down menus. So if you do think this is something you will have occasion to use and you want to have it added to your drop-down menu, just send a ticket to the help desk and you can get that added to your user profile drop-downs for you. So any questions, comments?
Yeah, Anna, so if I understand correctly, the standards, of course, that you've written out here, if a library does find themselves, if a public library does find themselves in a situation where they're talking to their local school and their local school, librarian wants to have a card at the public library perhaps for the specific reason that that local school librarian wants to have a type of like book club or something. So their stated goal is to say, well, I want a dozen copies of the same book because I'm going to do a book club or something. In a situation like that, would you like that public library staff to call you and discuss that? Because as you're just describing here, you don't want an institutional card holder to be placing holds on, 11 other public library items, etc.
Yeah, and that may end up being something where that's kind of outside the purview of this account type. That might be a situation where we would say, okay, if the teacher wants to be able to do that, that teacher, is kind of making a bigger commitment, and maybe like these books need to stay in the classroom, and then I'm comfortable checking them out on my personal teacher card or something like that.
Okay.
Or also, don't forget about IGAs. That may be a more, if there is something where you want to provide a higher level of service, then that may be more the route to follow. Because an IGA is, well, I mean, that's not an institutional card. It would still be kind of individuals and stuff, but teacher, and Kendall says that's what the teacher PL user profile is for. So, which does allow you to also, if the teacher, correct me if I'm wrong, that's regular teacher PL, they still have to live in your district, right? But if you have a teacher who lives outside of your district and you want to be able to issue them a card, then that's where the IGAs come into play. So, yeah. So the answer may be either kind of a, okay, yes, this is not the right profile for that. That is a teacher PL profile or something of that nature. Yeah. So. Any other questions about that? And like I said, I do kind of enjoy going down the rabbit holes of these highly specific edge cases. And if drawing them over with Kindle doesn't get me there, then I call up Joe Philippek at Rails and go, this library wants to do this weird thing. Is it legal? But this is intended to actually be sort of an expansion rather than a contraction. We're just sort of writing down something that has been sort of informal and fuzzily documented. So, all right. Next up, we have discarding items with active bills.
You should probably share your screen.
Yeah. Let me make sure I'm actually logged into workflows here. And I hope I actually have one on my account. I bet I do. Okay. So the thing, this is sort of a reminder / review of what does and does not block materials from being discarded. We are increasingly encouraging libraries more and more to use the discard users to discard rather than, directly removing items from the catalog. And so we occasionally get questions just kind of about like, okay, what does and does not block an item from discarding that way? And we kind of realized that we need to do a little bit of a refresher and a review on that front. So basically the things that will block you from discarding an item if you check it out to your discard user is if the item, if it's, there are active holds on it and it's kind of last one, I think even if it's not the last one, but usually it'll, the hold will get attached to another one and it'll cycle through and it'll clear the next month. But the other thing is if you check out an item to the wrong library's discard user, which happens occasionally, people choose, are just using the user search to find the discard, they click on the wrong library or something like that. So those are the two things that will block something from actually clearing off of your discard user. But the thing to remember though is that items that do have bills, you can still check those out to your discard user and those will clear when the discard reports run. So basically, the important thing to know about that is the main solution, and my honest suggestion is, if you're discarding materials, if you're doing a weeding project, you're going through lists, you're clearing stuff, I would highly encourage you to encourage your staff to double check to see whether there are bills on the item, because odds are that if someone owes you, $30 for this book, you probably just don't want to discard it yet. You should leave that in the system so that when they pay the bill, it's still like fully connected to the item and comes off and everything. But if you miss one and you discard it anyway, it will clear off your discard user. But what will happen is it will, I'm really hoping I have one of these on. I'm pretty sure I have one on my account. Okay, come on, there we go. This one has been discarded. You can see the item ID is no longer there. So the bill still kind of shows up on my account. This one has been paid, but even if it was unpaid, it would still show up on my account with the bill. And if I click on it, I can kind of see like where I checked it out, and I can see where it was billed, and I can see where I paid it, but I'm not actually seeing the owning library, which has been kind of the context where this has come up as a concern. So I would say if for some reason you are doing a weeding project and you notice that there's an item that has been billed and you really do feel like you really do need to go ahead and get that out of the system, then what I would encourage you to do is to add a bill note to that item, just kind of saying, and the way to do that is to right click, say edit bill note, and then say, item discarded, I don't know, let's say, something like that. Item ID was a blah, 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 belonged to, I don't know, we'll say Black PLD, something like that. And then that way there's a note that is, tracking that information that you're losing. Again, my honest suggestion is just don't delete that item yet because there's still an active bill and it's just a lot easier that way. But if you really gotta, or you catch one after the fact like this and you need to add it in, I would say if you catch one after the fact and the information's already gone, we can probably help you out with, scan history logs or something like that, but we don't want to have to do too many of those to figure out who owned this item that has since been discarded. So my main point though is that I don't want libraries to get cavalier about checking things out to the discard user and assuming it will be blocking things from discarding that it doesn't actually block from discarding is my main. If you take one thing away from that is make sure you really want to discard something, before you do it, because the discard user does kind of let more things through, I guess. Any questions? I don't know. Concerns? Okay.
The important thing to remember about discard from my point of view is that if you discard an item, you will get a count of what was discarded at the end of the month. Versus if you delete an item, sorry, we can't count it.
Yeah,
it's gone.
We cannot
can't
give you
run
stats.
a report on something that you've deleted. So,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Maybe I missed this in the beginning, but I routinely check things out to discard in Mobile Circ. How do I know if there's a bill? Do I need to go to my discard card before nothing tells me there's a bill on it.
If it's in,
I'm not going to check every item to see if there's a bill.
I guess that maybe I was, I don't know, trained somewhat differently at PPL, but I guess I was told that I had to check everything I wanted to discard for a bill.
That's a lot of work. I'm not doing that.
Okay, well, that's fine. But I mean, you do, I would think though that if it is currently in lost status, because you're still doing it through the checkout wizard. So if you check something out, or unless it doesn't do that in Mobile Circ, so you should get the item is lost or assumed to be lost message, the pop-up.
Well, I don't think it would show up. It would, yeah, but it wouldn't show up on my weeding report in Mobile Circ because the location is things that are on the shelf, not things in lost.
Right. So you wouldn't be discarding something that's got an active lost bill on it anyway. And you're probably not
Right.
stressed about something with a 30-cent fine. You know, that's
No.
probably not what you're worried about. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
I
more
just
worried
want to
about
make sure like
loss.
I wasn't doing
yeah.
something
You're fine.
totally wrong. I mean, I'm pretty
No,
cavalier
no.
with my discard card, Anna. I
Well,
use it
but
routinely. It's my
yeah, if
favorite thing.
you're working off a report that you know is already excluding things that are in lost status, then you're probably
Okay.
fine.
So
Yeah.
you're primarily talking about things in lost status and the billing.
Well, yeah, that have an
Gotcha.
active lost bill. Yeah.
Okay.
Active lost bill. Yeah, that's what I mean.
guess
when
I
say
missed that
have an active
clarification
bill.
again.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I
No,
might
that's
not
fine.
have been clear.
It's fine. I just, you know, you said don't be cavalier with your card. And I'm like, I'm cavalier with my card all the time.
You're being cavalier in the context of I have a report and I know what's on the report is what I actually want to discard. That's, I mean, if you're like, don't take a shelf list to your discard user and just check out everything on that shelf list.
Sure.
You narrow it down to the things.
Well, and the nice thing about the
And-
discard user is if you decide all of a sudden you don't want to weed something, you can check it back in.
As
And I
long as
will
you do it
say-
before the beginning of the next month.
Yeah. And it does show if the item has holds. That will pop up. If I go to check it out, discard,
Mhm.
it will show if an item has holds on it.
Right. And
That is a pop-up.
stuff can get stuck in a weird limbo because it's like a two-pronged report thing. There's a report that moves things to the discard location and then a report that deletes things out of the discard location. If you ever have one, let us know. Most of the errors do generate like an error message on the report, so we can help you investigate that if you ever do find weird things that just seem like they're just hanging out in discard but aren't either of the two kind of known not discard situations. And I do try to keep up on monthly. I get reports of any library that tries to discard the wrong libraries thing. The fact that you can only that only your own items will clear from discard does kind of help with this situation. So you know that eliminates some of the kind of concerns that you would accidentally report, you know, delete something that anyway. Yeah,
Anna-
just looking at those. Okay. Okay, is there a standard policy procedure for claims returned? The standard policy procedure is do not use claims returned, please. That is the standard. Please do not use it. If we find that a library has used claims returned, I don't know. I don't think we have too many libraries who do use it. I will soapbox a little bit and just say my take is that rather than using claims returned as a function in workflows, which is I'm assuming is what you're asking, to me that's just kicking the can down the road. And we've also had things that are claims returned revive as active checkouts in weird and unpredictable and frustrating ways. So claims returned as a function in workflows is basically just a way to kick the can down the road. To me, ultimately, you need to decide either I am billing this user for this item. I don't care that they claim they've returned it. I don't believe them. They are getting billed. Or I believe this user. I accept that the item is gone and I'm going to wash my hands of it. And then resolve the issue one of those two ways. Putting it in claims return just kind of, you know, doesn't really achieve much in my book other than confusion. So I have had libraries do things where they decide they don't want to delete the item yet though. And so they have set up an internal use card, which they may call quote lost or claims returned or something like that. But it's an internal library use card that they check those items out to as a holding period for a period of time before they make the final decision to delete it. I don't object. As long as it's kind of your items. Again, don't be doing this with other libraries' items. If a patron loses another library's item, they kind of need to just be billed. But you know. So I hope that answered the question, Beth. Let me know if not. And then next question is, I have an item that has been lost for several years by another library. Should I just leave it or discard it? It's up to you. You can leave it for a bit. There is kind of a standard for how long cards should be left in the system if they have fines and the quantity of fines. But there is not really kind of an equivalent time period for how long you should hang on, how long you should keep an item in the system that hasn't been billed. To a degree, it depends on you. If you are done with it and you don't really care if you ever get reimbursed for it and you want to go ahead and discard it, that's fine. But if you are still holding on to hope that maybe eventually the patron will pay for it, then I would leave the fine on the account, you know. Kendall, is that something that we've talked about, the age of fines, potentially trying to standardize clearing fine, you know, not fines, but bills?
I think that's generally a local library decision. Honestly, if somebody hasn't paid their fines and their card is expired for 4 years, you're probably not getting the money.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, we may need to go back and clean out old fines from, you know, 8-10 years ago. But again, these are, you know, people, if someone hasn't been in the library and paid their fine in that amount of time, you're probably never seeing them again anyway.
Right.
On that note, not that I will claim to be any kind of expert on that, but I just wanted to briefly say that this past summer, my library did a big like cleaning out of old fines. And if anyone would like to discuss that or anything, I can share what my library did. It was actually very helpful, and it was very eye-opening to not only my staff, but my trustees as well, for them to just be aware that we had all of this money, you know, technically owed to the library. And eventually they forgave pretty much everything, because they just said, this is crazy, we're never going to get it back. So if anyone wants to discuss something like that, I encourage you to do so.
All right. And we had a question that was kind of answered in the chat, but if we discard something with fines attached, will the fines disappear or remain attached to the patron's card with no item attached? It'll stay on the card, and it'll have basically like the item name and like some of the checkout dates in the checkout library, but not the item ID is kind of the part that'll disappear. So, and then if an item is checked out to a display account, that does also seem to prevent an item from being eliminated out of the discard user. That's interesting. That is, I think I'm assuming one of the recirc display accounts, which that is good to know that if it's also checked out to a recirc account, it will block. That's a sufficiently specific case that I was not aware that being checked out to a recircing account would also block that. So thank you for sharing that. All right. Okay, where was I next?
Patron reg standards. And I think we can just kind of skip over this in light of time, but basically for schools, your graduation year for the high school graduation year needs to go in user cat 6 and group ID is for anything else you want to track.
And I will say this is our first thing where something that should have always been a standard probably has been created. So we were excited. Anyway. Okay. We still have some notices out there that have the little marker that we used in our file naming convention that said we were using COVID specific text or had adjusted your message timing for COVID. If you are unsure whether you're still using special text or not, or just want to review your notice text in general, please send a ticket to the help desk. And then we have another standard. In the interest, we have noted, we have an emergent, I don't know, trend. This standard is mostly based on kind of what we have discovered is the standard kind of emerged from what y'all were already doing is what I would say. So Kendall, can you share that, or do you want me to pull it up?
Oh, I can probably share it.
Okay.
Hold on here. There we go.
All right, nice. Okay. Basically, we created a document that is kind of a notices explainer And then, so we have a guide and a standard. The guide is more for new libraries. Hopefully, most people kind of are aware of the notice types, but every now and then we have someone who goes, hey, I'm not using courtesy notices. I'd like to do that. So this is just, the guide is just kind of a bit of an explainer of what the different types are and what they do. But the notice standard is recommended timing of these. Please, no one panic. We are not going to go through and change all of your notices to match this timing. We do not have time for that. But you may, if you request changes in the future, or if you don't have notices and like to set them up, or, I mean, you're probably not in this meeting, but if you're a new library joining, we are going to be recommending these sorts of time frames, unless you have some really specific reason that you need to do something different, and you might have to do a little bit more convincing than you would have in the past to tell us, but we will not be going through and, forcing all of the existing notices into this. But these have kind of emerged as sort of the common sort of breakpoints of notices. So we are recommending, that like fine-free libraries use a shorter time frame for things going into lost status. So we recommend 14 days for things to go into lost status. You can probably bargain us to 21, but we're probably not going to want to do too much more variation. The default timing is 20 days for movies, 30 days for other materials for not fine-free libraries. So basically, we've kind of got a somewhat more limited set of when things go into lost status. And then for libraries, for notices, like we kind of recommend that you do overdue notices. You do 3, you do them at 2, 5, and 10 days overdue. And then your stuff goes, so they get the final notice 4 days before their stuff goes into lost status, which seems like a pretty good, kind of bargain for warning, people that, hey, we're really serious now. If you charge fines, we kind of gave you a couple of options, because there are kind of those sort of breakpoints of when stuff goes into lost status, and which is based largely on loan period. So the stuff that goes into lost status at 20 days overdue is often stuff that only has like a 1-week checkout. So for those, we say 3 days overdue, 7 days overdue, 14 days overdue. So you get your final notice a little bit before it actually gets billed. And then if you have like a 30-day one, we're like 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You get kind of a reminder that your stuff is late once a week. So those are kind of, and that's really a standard that emerged based on kind of us sort of looking at what we think most libraries are already doing. So we're not trying to impose a burdensome standard. We're trying to say what standard is already kind of emerging organically. So for the record, we recommend courtesy notices at like 3 days before the due date, unless it's something where it's only got like a very short due date and maybe you want to do day before. We do have, some sample notices. One thing I would like to put out eventually is kind of my, I don't know, there's some wording on some notices that seems very old. So I may at some point come up with wording that I really like and try to soapbox about it a little bit, but there's some that seems slightly old and scoldy out there. So notices are one of those things that does warrant keeping up to date. Okay, I think that's it on that.
All right. And again, we're not going back and applying these to everybody, but when you do start making changes, we're going to be recommending that this is what you do. And especially for libraries that share patrons between each other, having your notices be basically on the same schedule will save you a lot of headache, and it will save us some research and troubleshooting time when a patron calls and says they didn't get a notice, and it turns out it's because the library next door to the one they usually use has different notice text, and the patron's used to getting it 4 days out and the library's sending it 2 days out, and then they get all upset. So
RSA Day, we're doing it live this year. We hope you're ready. More info to come. We are still going to use 5 points because they're letting us still reapply our deposit from 2019 or 2020, whatever that was, which we think is very cool of them. So we are happy to continue to work with them. And it may be a larger space than we need, but hopefully that will assist with spacing and stuff like that. So
Anna,
fingers crossed. Yeah.
do you want to give the date?
What is it? That had come out after our meeting. So April 14th
Yes.
yes. So April 14th is the date. It's shortly before Thanksgiving, not Thanksgiving, good Lord, Easter, but not, not like it's Holy Thursday, I guess, not Good Friday. So hopefully you can still come. More info to come. We'll probably do lunches and things like that. But we will probably need to figure out, Lexi will be in touch about whether we need anything from Washington Library. We are still, this is early days, but we are working on it. More info to come. And yeah, send us info about your, we are the formerly semi-regular RSA newsletter is now going to be quarterly. So we decided we would make it actually regular-ish. So we're going to do it, I don't know, what did we decide? Midwinter, midsummer, and the equinoxes. So if you have news from your library that you wish to share, send it to the help desk, say something about newsletter in the title, and hopefully people will assign that to me, and then we'll just kind of store up stuff. Maybe we'll put a form on the website at some point, but share us your like cute display pics and all that stuff.
All right. I am not, okay, no, maybe I can pause the recording. All right, so we're going to talk about the budget draft. I do not record budget information on these recordings because if it's out on the internet, our vendors will look at it. So I'm going to pause. There we go. And the most important thing, which is the thing everybody wants to know, is did fees go up for FY23? And the answer is yes. Fees will go up the greater of $50 or 2%. And when you work the actual numbers on membership costs, full online members will be 2% higher than what you were this year. Basic online and union listing members will go up $50. If you look back, I was going to put the increase history from 2013 forward on the slide, and then I forgot. But essentially, in 2013, that was the last year of the old, where RSA paid quite a lot of money to Rails for support. 2014, Rails started paying RSA money to help us and gave us more personnel. And we were able to lower fees in 2014 about $110,000. Some of you got fairly significant decreases in fees in 2014. And we have held the line since that time. I think we had a 3% increase and a 1% increase since 2014. So we have tried as long as we could not to be raising prices, but we are at the point now where our fees, we know our fees are going, or not our fees, but our expenses are going up. So we're going to have to start increasing fees to cover that. So if you want to know what your FY23 membership will be, if you are a basic online or a union lister, just add $50. If you're a full online, you multiply that by 2%, or you can just email me or email the help desk and we will send you those figures. And we're an hour and 8 minutes in, which means it's break time.
Sounds good.
I'm going to pause the recording. Please be back at like 2:12 or 2:13. All right. We are back. Laura is still not back, but some of us are. So we will be discussing reciprocity. This is kind of a carry-on discussion from the previous users group meeting where we started talking about reciprocity and we started talking about how that was being implemented in libraries and what the policy was and what can the system do to make it work better. And we talked quite a bit about it and then decided we need more information and you wanted more information and that we would talk about it at the next meeting. So we are at the next meeting. So let's talk about it. And I assume you want the poll results up?
If you've got them handy, if not, I do. Well, or I thought I did.
Do have them handy here somewhere. Very long document. No. No. No.
There. Haha.
Oh, I was looking for graphics. That's why I didn't see it.
I did the same thing. All right. And here I'll pull up the. Okay. I will share briefly and then I'll go back to that. Yes, sure. Okay. Okay. So our initial survey, I asked 2 questions, and there may be more surveys to come, who knows, but the initial survey was kind of about a point that we felt that the original policy was insufficiently clear on, which was kind of the question of if you do not own an item type, you own an item type and have set up a hold rule that says you're not sending it, but you just flat out don't own an item type. So think of things like video games and playaways that are not owned by every library. If your library does not own playaways, you would probably share them if you had them, but you just don't. Can you receive them? So in the interest of narrowing down our topics, that was our first question. And we asked the question from 2 standpoints. First of which was, how are you interpreting the current policy? And then the second question of which was, without considering the current policy, what do you think the policy should be? So as you can see, this is question 1, which is based on your understanding of the existing policy. Should you be able to request materials for your patrons, even if you do not own that item type? And as you can see, this is not exactly an even split, but it's a pretty good spread. Still slight preference for yes, you should be, you can get them. A lot for if the library is willing to send it, I don't care. And then a fair amount of no's, and 2 people had no opinion. I would like to meet those 2 people. But the next question was, you can see the results are very different here. This is the what do you think the policy should be, regardless of what you think it currently is. And in this case, we had, over 50% say, yes, if you don't own playaways, you should still be able to receive them. This is not the same thing as you have decided not to share something. This is just you don't own it. And then a good 40% saying, who cares? If they're willing to send it to me, I'll take it. I as the sending library can make that call. And then 3% that said no. I'm kind of considering that sort of a mandate as far as the direction we should go in the policy, that not owning an item is not at all the same as owning an item, but deciding not to share it. This also takes at least some of the unpredictability out, because that was definitely a feature that there was no way Workflows was going to be able to enforce for us. Basically, Workflows was not going to be able to be set up to have a reciprocity rule that would take into account whether or not a library owned something. So that at least gives us some guidance on that aspect of it. And I will not read this to you because we do not have time, but we got a ton of good feedback, which I kind of summarized this, and a lot of the same points came up in the discussion we had at the circulation committee meeting last month. But I kind of summarized it here, and this is kind of a summary of just sort of the themes that emerged. A lot of libraries feel that it's a waste of time to send stuff to a library only to have that library decide, oh, that doesn't meet my reciprocity rules, I have to send it back. A lot of times it's the sending library, the owning library, that's saying, well, I sent it to you, use it. So there's that. A lot of libraries would like to be able to have the hold rules work well enough that you can just say, if Workflows let me place the hold, I'm placing the hold. If Workflows put it on my pick list, I'm sending it out. If, basically, If workflows let me, I'm going to do it. I think that sounds great. And I think that's another incentive to standardize item types. Also, there was concern that libraries may not know their own hold rules that well. They may need to review them. They expressed interest in like, hey, can we make sure people are reviewing their hold rules on a regular basis to make sure you don't have rules just because you've had them for 15 years. And then there was also some discussion of just large libraries and small libraries have very different concerns in this regard. You have different issues if you're managing a huge pick list versus if you're managing a small pick list, and different concerns if you're managing a huge collection versus a small collection. So those were sort of the themes and such that emerged. Now y'all get to talk.
Anna, how many libraries of those 88 people that answered, how many individual libraries answered?
Oh gosh, I went through, I didn't do an official count. I did not notice a ton of duplicates. There were maybe 2 or 3 here or there. I would say at least 30 to 40 different libraries. If we kind of say at most 2 to 3 duplicates per library, I did not find any library that had submitted like 10 responses, but there were definitely some of the larger libraries where I got like 2 or 3 from,
The other
So I
thing
do not
I'll
have
say
that
is
count to hand.
this absolutely hit a nerve. That is the highest number of responses we have ever gotten to a survey, probably the last 5 or 6 years. So we
Including votes for board
Yes.
members and stuff.
Correct. Yes, we were very surprised by the number but happily surprised, I'll say, by the number of responses, not only responses, but really, really high quality comments that we got from folks taking the chance to fill out the comment box. So everybody who participated, thank you very much. That was very helpful to us.
So since no one is chiming in yet, I mean, going forward, I think we will, based on this, as we look at rewriting the policy, we're probably going to include clarification that not owning an item is not the same, that the reciprocity limitations apply to, I have a rule that says I do not share an item type, not that I don't share it because I don't own it. So we're going to include that clarification for sure. Another topic of discussion, which if y'all would like to chime in at this point, is given the number of responses that said, if the library is willing to send it, I think I should be able to receive it. I think I would kind of like to somewhat reopen the discussion of on which library's end is the decision made? Is it the sending library? If you're not cool with sending it out, then you don't send it out. But if you receive it, it's fair game, sort of thing. That I feel like that would simplify a lot personally, but and then also, how would you feel about us writing the policy that says workflows is managing reciprocity as well as the system can? If it shows up on your pick list and you really don't want to send it, we have a mechanism for not sending it, but otherwise send the book out and say, go with God, and let the library get it, and move on.
Just so we're clear, can you explain like how that reciprocity in workflows goes? So if a library doesn't have something that is video game item type or whatever, however it functions, those holds can be placed?
Yeah, if right now I don't, to my knowledge, Kendall, correct me if I'm wrong, workflows is not at all looking at what you own, it's looking at what your rules are. So it's looking at, do you have hold rules that prevent the hold rules or what are preventing holds from being placed? It's not looking at ownership of item types or anything like that at all, is my
Yes, we need this
understanding,
chart.
right? Yes.
Because this is what dovetails into this.
Yeah, exactly. This all goes really nicely with kind of the item type standardization conversation.
So, okay, so to answer your question, Gina, the way that reciprocity works in the system is that if you have a hold rule that is either no holds at all, which would be this line, or local holds only, which would be this line, for a particular item type, then the system can do reciprocity in a very coarse way. In that, for item type book new, there are 4 libraries, 8 total branches, but 4 member libraries that don't allow holds at all. And so if a patron of one of those 4 libraries tries to place a hold on a record that that library does not own, and there is a new book, or I'm sorry, a book new attached to that record, the hold should be blocked, because the system will say, oh, well, they don't do holds, so we can't place a hold. There
Kendall,
are 50. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Kendall. Did you or Anna want to say really quickly how a library director can find their hold rules, or should they send an email into the help desk?
It is on the support site under system parameters. There is a hold map. Here I can
Right
send.
here under
Here's the
general links, there's a system parameters page, and then you go right
Your
here.
screen didn't move. We're still seeing the item
Here.
types.
I put it in the chat, the link to the
Okay,
system
thank you.
parameters page. It is 4th link from the top, and it'll just say
That was
hold
just
map.
uploaded today.
Nice.
Thank you.
A
Thank
fresh
you,
hold
folks.
map.
Kendall,
Yes.
can you repeat what you said about how the holds reciprocity works?
Supposed to work.
Supposed to work, because I don't think it does.
Well, that's the thing. The system sometimes does not do what we think the system should be doing. So no holds is a little bit easier for the system to figure out. And again, this is patron placed holds, right? This is not staff. The system assumes that a staff member at workflows, if it pops up a rule and says, sorry, you can't place this hold, and you overwrite it, the system's going to be like, okay, whatever. And that only takes effect in the no holds rule area. These number of local holds only, this is only for patrons in RSA CAT placing holds. And the way this would work is there are 51 libraries with 56 locations that for book new, you can place a hold on it if your library owns it, but only if your library owns it. So if there is a book new item type on another record, you're not supposed to be able to place the hold. Now, I'm not saying that you can't. I'm saying you're not supposed to be able to.
So, you know that what I find is if I don't own the book and it's not the first library that has it in book new, then it goes through. The app actually works the way you think it should and really won't let you put things on hold.
That's
Like
fun.
I said, it does not work perfectly. It is not the end all be all. And when we were talking about holds reciprocity, in large part, we were talking about it in 2 ways. Number 1 was, what do I do if I don't own the item? Number 2 was, how about my new items, right? And so that brought up the whole new items discussion. I'm going to change screens. Did what I'm sharing, did it change at all?
It is still the no hold or local hold rules spreadsheet.
Okay, I'm going to stop my screen share. And then I'm going to try sharing it again. For whatever, I've never had Zoom. The entire time we've used Zoom, I have never had Zoom crash. And it has crashed multiple times today. Oh, crashed again.
Oh no. I feel like I should do a dance.
I don't have a good feeling about getting a recording from this meeting today, considering the number of times Zoom has crashed on me now.
I mean, it says it's still recording, so.
Yeah, it says it's recording. We'll see.
We'll see.
All right, I'm going to try share my screen again. Which one? That's this screen, I believe. Okay, now you should be seeing the count of things cataloged. Okay. All right, so where were we in the overall. Okay, so here's, now do you see the reciprocity slide again?
Yes.
Okay. So before we talk about new item types, because that is the flip side of the reciprocity policy, does everyone agree that it's probably smart that we rewrite our existing reciprocity policy in light of the survey feedback that we got? And again, that is because it's a policy, that is something that would get written with the committee, brought to the board / users group, get approved, and then it would go into effect to replace our current reciprocity policy, which is
Yes.
clearly very confusing.
Yes. Good. Thank you.
Lovely.
Also, because we've already spent a lot of time on it, and it would be a bummer if y'all were like, no, the existing policy is totally fine. And I would be like, no, it's clearly not, because no one agrees on what it means. So, all right. Thank y'all.
All right. So then the flip side of the reciprocity policy is what the system can actually do. And as we just learned, not greatly in many ways. And partially that's because we have lots and lots of item types, and there's no way without having a very small number of item types system-wide to make sure that everything on a particular record is cataloged exactly the same way. If every item added to whatever the brand new, Tom Clancy novel was new book, every item on new book, then Hold's reciprocity would work fine. But because that's not the way we work, it can't do what we want it to do. So the question was then asked, well, we have all these new item types. Do we need all these new item types? Are having all these new item types causing reciprocity problems or problems for patrons placing holds on items? And the answer is yes. We have 20 item types in the system that are used to catalog new items. 18 of those 20 are still in use. There are 2 of them that have been retired. One of them was Blu-ray 3D. Nobody's buying any Blu-ray 3Ds. Not very many people actually bought Blu-ray 3Ds. They just never took off. The other one was new AV, which is a horrible, horrible item type. And we don't use AV anymore because no one knew what AV was. It was either a movie or a CD or a record or a piece of sheet music or equipment. Nobody knew. So I went back and I started looking at how many items in any of those 20 new types existed in our system. And we have 99 items cataloged at 17 libraries that were cataloged and added to the system, the individual items, in the year 2007. If you were in RSA in 2007, you will know that is the year that we migrated from our old system to our current system. And I looked up about half of those 99 items, between a third and half. And almost all of them were cataloged as new item and then migrated into our system and were never changed. So I'm pretty sure items from 2007 are no longer new. Same thing with 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and so on. You'll notice the number of libraries using these item types over the years, and the number of items in those 18 new item types, 20 new item types, is increasing year over year. We have 44,000 new items that were added in 2021. That's a number, I believe. We have 4,800 from the year 2020. That's a number I can believe, in that a lot of schools will leave an item marked as new for the entire school year. But we're past a new school year, so those items purchased in 2020 should probably not be new anymore. And again, these were when the items were added to the system in that new item type. So it's not that it was something that you just bought attaching to a title that was published that year. These were the years these items were added to the system. So we have cleanup to do, because these items, any of these items, can cause your patrons to not be able to place a hold on an item. depending on what your hold rules are. And that is not the intent. This one just basically goes by item type. What item type, what is the item type, and how many of them are there, and when were they added? And then again, the number of libraries at the very bottom. There's some very clear grouping of items. So book new is very popular, new book, very popular. And you might say, well, why do we have both book new and book new? Book new and new book? And that is because many years ago, when we added these codes to the system, libraries would buy multiple copies of the same brand new title. One would be for holds locally, one would be for holds system-wide, another one might be for rental. And to make the items holdable, not holdable, and have different circulation rules, you have to use different item types. Most of the libraries that were doing those types of things a number of years ago are no longer doing those types of things. And so now we have lots and lots of item types that aren't really being used. For example, book new short. That's the book new S1. No items in the entire system use that code. Why do we have it? There are 27 items that are book paperback new. Again, not a great reason to have these things, some of them. Again, the Blu-ray 3D, that's a dead format, and new AV is one that we have declared a dead format because it was causing all kinds of issues. But all these other ones, we think there's the ability to, we certainly need to clean up anything in this area on this chart, and that will be a cleanup project that we can do. Basically, what we're going to have to do is send out lists of these things to libraries and say, hey, could you please look at these? And then it'll probably end up being a new end of month report. You know, items X number of months old in any of these new item types, please review and correct these items, something along that line. Okay, so questions for the group. Oh, hold on, I got to get my chat open again, see if there's any new things on here. Just change everything. Okay, so the question is just change everything from before 2020 to not new. That is our next little slide on here. And that is, oh, sorry. That is, oh, I didn't put it on here. It's in the handout, and it looks like this. So I was trying to figure out, is there a way that we can auto-convert things that are new to non-new item types? And there is not. And the reason why there is not is because there are about 30 different item types for books, and we don't know what y'all use, right? So in some libraries, book new is going to become book. In other libraries, it's going to become something else. So what we were thinking might make sense, and again, this is something that would then have to start at committee level and work its way through. This is where we talk about a new item types policy versus a new item type standard. The policy might be that for public libraries, we expect public libraries to convert things from being a new book to a standard item type at X number of days. And I don't know what that X number of days is, if it's 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, whatever. It should be somewhat standard though across the system to help with reciprocity.
When they get time, just send an email.
For schools, we definitely need to make a different rule because they deal with their much smaller collections in a different way. And a lot of schools, like I said, will leave things new either for 6 months or for the entire school year. So that would have to be a different thing. We only have one special library, and I don't believe they're even using new item types particularly. And we've only got 2 or 3 academics. So again, whatever their rules are, we could do that. So our thought was, okay, we can potentially automate. how long, to move book new and new book to just plain old book at X number of days. But if we're going to do that, what we would end up having to do is say, okay, on the 20th of the month, anything that is any book new or new book that's been in the system for 90 days or more is going to be automatically converted to book. And then on the 1st of the month, we would send you a list of things that were in that 90-day region and say, these are the items that we will auto convert on the 20th. If you don't want them to become item type book, you need to change them to a different item type before the 20th of the month. If we were to automate it, that is the way we would have to do it, because we can't run scripts to know every library, what item types you're using and what converts to what. And, are you using new book for both juvenile and adult books, in which case, they need to be different item types probably on the back end. So that's the only way we could really systematically do it. And it would be, again, we would have to run reports for you, let you change, give you a reasonable amount of time to change them, and then auto-magically convert later in the month. Okay, so Melody says that should be a standard for how long something is considered new. I would say that should probably be a policy, because that is a goal or a statement of intent. In RSA, we think things should be new for X number of days, right? And that is our goal. Our statement of intent is for public libraries to have items show up as new for pick your time. And then the standard then that would come below that policy, which could be changed without having to revote on the policy, would be, this is how we're going to deal with the problem, how we're going to deal with conversion, and how we would deal with other things. Yes,
So
Elizabeth.
one of the things that I wonder about is, are people going to freak out about new stickers? Because I move my stuff to book, but I leave it on the new shelf, the new location shelf. Its home location is new fiction, but its type is book, and I will send it to anybody who wants it.
Well, I think we just described a policy for reciprocity that would say if you sent them the book, they would take it and check it out to whoever had requested.
Okay. Yeah, because if I send you the book, you can have the book. Because I do, and that goes to Amy too. I move things out of the new book to book, but leave them at the new location until, and we are likewise a 4 to 6, however long it takes before the shelf looks too full, kind of before we move it around the corner.
I think the other question I have for all of you is, there were some pretty clear takeaways from looking at the number of libraries that are doing no holds or local holds on particular item types, and what new item types were not getting any kind of hold rules against them placed. I think we can consolidate down the number of new item types that we're using, but I don't know what the outcome and what the effect towards all of you are. So we're going to have to do a little more digging to find out how many libraries are using multiple new book codes and things like that, to see and to come back to a committee that can then kind of figure out, okay, as a general standard, we think that we should be using new book and not book new, and we want to get rid of book new and just have everybody use new book instead. Well, does that cause problems? Are there some libraries that are using both of those? And if they are using both those item types, why are they using both of those item types? What's the intent on the library's purpose or library's end on why they're using those things? So while I think there is some more consolidation that we can do here, that is something that we definitely need to get more data on to know who it's going to affect, and then bring that back to committees and work our way through to say, ideally, as part of the standard for reciprocity, we should only be using, say, 10 or 11 new item types, and here's what they should be. I'm going to read through the questions here. I don't know the answer to your question, Nick. If it's on a temp record, though, it is something that could easily be excluded from any kind of auto magical moves.
Hey, Kendall, I just wanted to chime in with a couple things about that. With on orders, we would need to exclude those from this auto conversion process because we don't want to be converting those when you don't actually have the physical item in the library. There's a lot of variation in how on orders are done by libraries in terms of the codes used. So that's something that may have to be part of this project. Some libraries, for example, use on order as the item type and or home location. Some libraries use a mix of on order with book new or new book. And then there will be a little bit, I don't want to say if a problem, but something we definitely need to consider is, let's say that the on order item, you put it in, let's see, today's November 3rd. It's going to have an item created date of November 3rd, the on order item. Let's say you get the actual physical book, it comes January 3rd. Well, that book, if you edit the on order item that has all the holds attached to it, if you edit that to your actual book that physically arrived in your hands January 3rd, I think the auto conversion process we may need to do some tweaking in that, because it's going to see that book that you just got and say, oh, this was put in November 3rd. It's 2 months old. Let's flip it to regular book, when actually you just got it in. So there's probably going to need to be some changes to how on orders are done, so that the date of the on order, the actual item creation date, is not considered for this auto conversion process, if that makes sense without going too much further into all the little complicated details.
Yes, and this is the joys of running a big system, is we have to consider every edge case prior to doing anything automatically, which is why generally if somebody ever asks us for a bulk convert, we generally are sending you a spreadsheet prior to doing that to say, here's what we're going to convert. Let us know if there's anything we shouldn't. Because that's, yeah, as Anna says, simplifying things turns out to be very complicated, because it is. All right, so I think in light of the questions and the comments, this is something, again, that's probably going to need to bubble up along with that reciprocity policy. This is kind of the biggest area where reciprocity rears its ugly head, outside of, I don't physically have any playaways. Should I be able to place holds on playaways? This is the one area where it's a real problem. So, the reciprocity policy should be separated out from whatever the new item type policy is, but those policies do work hand in hand and probably need to get kind of shepherded through the committee process around the same time, because they do affect each other. All right, any other questions? We need to kind of move on here, I think. All right, I have Erica's slides, so I'm going to throw them in here. Hold on just a second. And oops, I don't want to print Erica's slides. I want to show them. Are you seeing the cataloging reminders and updates slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Erica.
Okay, just a few things to keep you up to speed with what's been going on for cataloging, both with the RSA staff and with you, our membership. In terms of restructuring, this may look like a familiar slide. We've talked about it the past couple meetings. It was about a year ago that we started a restructuring project. Realizing that the volume of incoming requests and the age of them waiting to be processed was not getting any smaller or younger. So we had started this project, like I said, about a year ago. Phase one is finished. It's been finished. We made some changes to cataloging request procedures, most notably ending the submission of some records that have a level of bibliographic description that it's not perfect, but it's good enough for you and your patrons to find it and have an idea of the item's content. So we stopped submissions for those in January. Last Friday, we held the first restart of the OCLC connection training. This training has been rebranded as RSA BibLoad workshops. Think of it as just giving you the information that you need in order to use Connection Client to find bibliographic records for items that aren't in workflows. Basically how to format the records so that they mesh well when you load them into workflows. We're not covering start to finish how to use OCLC Connection Client. That's a piece of software that fortunately OCLC itself has quite a few good recorded modules to show you the ins and outs. So we're trying to tailor this workshop, like I mentioned, just to what you need to know specifically to use it with RSA. And the other benefit is that workshop, I think it may need to be 2.5 hours just to allow for some open-ended time at the end for Q&A. We did 2 hours last week, the first time this was offered, and that was a little bit tight in terms of time, but we really don't want you to sit through another, 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours of RSA training on this product when you've done that with the OCLC modules. We did implement new, simpler cataloging request forms back in July. Remember at the last meeting, there was a survey that went out on the listserv. We did get some really helpful feedback.
Back for donations?
There were about 20 recipients for the survey. And even though there weren't as many, especially compared to Anna's reciprocity survey, like I said, we still got helpful feedback. A couple of the top takeaways, me included, the team included, we find the double confirmation emails that you get when you submit a cataloging request very annoying. And I see that there was just an email today about that. So that's something we'll be looking at. And also to trying to think about a binge box form. We know so many of you are cataloging these very popular multi-title, all you can watch items. And it's a little bit convoluted right now, having to use the KIT cataloging request form. So that's something else. We know we need revisions. So we're hoping to do those either by year's end or early in 2022. The partnership with the Cataloging Maintenance Center that we've talked about, CMC, they are still willing to help us with some of those records in the cataloging backlog that we had asked you, our membership, to submit before we made those changes back in January. Some of those records that don't have perfect description and could use some upgrading. The project is delayed, but don't worry, they're still willing to help us. As Pam, the coordinator there, told me, is just let us know when you're ready and we'll be ready. So we will we will still move ahead with this, just at a later timeline. And then the last phase on here, I did start to do this a little bit during the recent BibLoad workshop, and it is part of the documentation. But there were some questions during the workshop about, well, what happens if I want to edit OCLC records or create new original records? So this, like I mentioned, has started to be talked about, but I think we'll probably need additional clarification. And that's a little bit lower in the list. So sometime next year. But we do want to make clear that there's not an expectation or a requirement from RSA to be cataloging at an advanced level, doing OCLC originals, upgrades, edits. Certainly if it's part of your job description and it's a conversation you've had with your supervisor or director, that's one thing, but we just don't want members to feel like, oh, you're using OCLC connection now, you better be, doing full scale cataloging. Okay, as always, updates will be on the listserv, but I think we'll push forward. Okay, so in terms of cataloging request processing times, the standard request, really, I should have 28 to 35 days here. We're trying to keep it to 21 to 28, but remember that our department is short-staffed with Jane's departure, and working remotely has not helped our cause either under the Rails remote work policy. We recognize the turnaround time needs to come down, and I'll talk in a couple minutes about steps that we're taking to work towards that goal. Just remember, standard cataloging requests means it will be cataloged on some kind of record. It may not be a full OCLC record. It may need to be revisited later. Rush cataloging requests, that's still within 2 business days. But keep in mind, it's just for uses like a specific patron, maybe a teacher is waiting for it. Maybe you need it for an upcoming program at your library. And if you submit a rush request digitally using photos, scans, maybe a cloud storage site like Google, those can be processed within 2 business days. But if you drop a rush request in delivery, remember, it needs to make its way here to the East Peoria office, and then it waits for a cataloger to pick it up. Cataloging staff each visit the office at least once a week, but there may not be somebody there the day it arrives. So just remember, with rush requests, you can send them in delivery, but that's going to add some time to it. In terms of what we're trying to do to speed the processing time, was that earlier last month? I think it's been about a month now. We did change quite a bit internally how the RSA cataloging team processes requests. Instead of having individual queues for Lisa, Rhonda, and Jennifer, now there's a shared queue of all the requests, and they're pulling from those oldest to newest, trying to get a better handle on the workload as a whole rather than per individual cataloger. Starting to do improved cataloging for what I affectionately call the weird stuff. So binge boxes, cake pans, puzzles, kits, your non-traditional library materials that I know are becoming more traditional with Library of Things. But as Kendall mentioned, with Jane departing from RSA, it was a good opportunity for us to take a look at how we've been processing cataloging requests, particularly those that were done by the senior specialist, her position. And we decided, in order to get better quality bibliographic description, and also once the team is comfortable, getting more comfortable with cataloging these weird items, it'll speed the processing time. So we do plan to start for weird items that have been submitted. They're going to start being put on OCLC records. I know for some libraries that causes concern with possible world share interlibrary loan requests. So we do have a new item category 5 code that's called OCLC exclude that can be assigned to those items to prevent holdings updated in OCLC. All of this will go on the listserv. It's still very new and we had many details on our end. We've been working out in the past week or so. So don't worry. I know this is not the first time you'll see this. And then restarting the BibLoad workshops. This is something else that we know as more members take this training. Ideally, you'll act on the training and start loading records yourself. So then that will reduce the number of cataloging requests coming to us. You'll still need to submit requests if you're using OCLC, but it's just for items where there's a brief record, maybe there's a crummy OCLC record, or maybe there's nothing at all. So with BibLoad workshops, that should help us the further we get into offering these. It should reduce the incoming volume and allow us to decrease the turnaround time. In terms of the backlog right now, we're just trying to see if these 3 changes I recently here talked about that are listed, we're just trying to see if those could make a dent in the volume and the age of what's coming in. But we realize that the backlog is going to have to factor into this more fully than it has been. So at this point, I think I'll just leave it at that. But rest assured, all of those requests that you've submitted to us over the past couple years, if they've not been revisited for OCLC cataloging, they will be. I really appreciate everyone being patient because I know this has been quite the process trying to figure out how we can make this more manageable. Okay, I think we're ready to go forward. We've noticed an uptick in items cataloged on wrong records. I put some frequent goof up scenarios here. We may need to look at a policy for how multi-disc sets are cataloged for TV series. This has caused issues lately. I know it's caused issues off and on, but there have been holds issues lately with patrons thinking they're getting a full season of a TV show. They get, the 3rd disc and they've not seen the first 2 discs. So that might be something that's ripe for a policy. But notice there's lots of mix-ups here. I'm trying to think about on our end how we can be more proactive about watching for some of these issues. But right now with the volume of requests as they are, and then also being down a person, it just isn't happening at this point. So if you do come across goof ups like this, maybe it's a large print on a regular print, DVD on a Blu-ray, please report them to us. I know several libraries in this meeting do a great job of that. I know Peoria and Macomb, Peoria Heights, several of you report these. So that's great. Please do that because that's the only way we can correct it and make sure that the patron has a good experience. And now, as always, if you have time or energy and you want to do some cleanup in your collection, see if you might have some items goofed up, like one of those scenarios, feel free to reach out to me and we can discuss strategies if, like I said, you think you might have the time or the energy to do it. But if not, we'll correct them as they're reported to us and hopefully be able to do a routine project at some point. Let's push forward. Okay, as Anna mentioned a little bit earlier in this meeting, we're trying to make the quarterly RSA newsletter a little bit more, as she put it, lighter and fluffier with topics from you, our membership, not so much from us of, here's 20 steps of what we need you to do to resolve this issue. So we're trying to get some more member-based submissions. So for the cataloging corner, I wanted to ask each of you to consider if your library's cataloging anything fun or unusual. Maybe it's for a special project, you got a grant. Maybe it's just because you're trying to get different items in the library to appeal to different patrons. So if you're cataloging anything that you think is fun or unusual, we'd love to hear about it. And we could spotlight you in the cataloging corner. And then keep a lookout because we'll also watch on our end if neat things are submitted to us to catalog. So you may see your items spotlit too in that corner. Just a few events coming up for RSA cataloging. The basic cataloging workshops and the BibLoad workshops are scheduled this month and next month. We're planning to do more in 2022. We've not set dates yet, so watch the listserv. There is a cataloging virtual office hours, open-ended Q&A, networking time. There is time for that next month. I don't think we've got a date yet, so stay tuned. Roundtables, we haven't done one of these recently, but if we have a specific topic to discuss, we'll be sure to schedule one. We were going to have a database committee meeting next Wednesday, November 10th at 9:30. I don't think I have anything urgent enough to talk about that can't go in a listserv post. So we were trying to talk about internally if we had anything that we really needed to discuss, but I think mostly getting this information out about OCLC exclude and the new processing for weird items. I think that's the most important information. So that will go on the listserv in addition to what was mentioned here. And then the technical services networking group, the future of that group is to be determined. So let's go to the last slide, Kendall. Okay, so we're in search of both a chair, co-chair for the RSA Technical Services Networking Group and also for the database committee. Heidi Ray at Alpha Park did a great job serving these two positions over the past year. She's accepted a new position at her library though, so she won't be as involved with technical services in that new position. Both positions are painless. The technical services networking group, that's truly at the interest of you, our membership. If there's interest among your cataloging staff in having this type of group where they can meet with other technical services staff from other libraries virtually, maybe at some point it will be safe to do it virtually and in person. But if there's interest among your staff, see what they think about this group. And if they want this group to continue, please encourage them to volunteer serving as chair or co-chair. This group did meet once earlier this year. And they talked about lots of helpful topics, not just RSA related, but materials vendors, classification and organization of graphic novels, how they do call numbers for juvenile books that are in series. Do you use the series versus the author? So lots of topics were talked about when this group met in February. And with Heidi no longer able to serve as the chair, I just wanted to put this out here that we're looking for a new chair if there's still interest among you doing this group. Database committee, next meeting will be in January. I put elected here because it's usually one of you volunteering graciously to serve as database chair, but that is a one-year term with no term limit. So if you're interested in serving, please contact the help desk, but thank you though to each of you for getting the word out among your cataloging staff that we have these leadership opportunities open and see if they might be interested. I think that's it for me. That's plenty. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
All right. Got some things from the systems department here in interest of keeping this within a reasonable time period. I will go through these. You should be seeing new report request forms by the end of the month, hopefully sooner. We're going to break the single form into multiple forms so that we can better target those questions. There's no point in asking you about when do you want the report scheduled if it's a one-time report request. So you'll be seeing those soon. You'll probably also be seeing at some point in the nearish future bulk item edit bulk item modification type forms as well. That's another area where people will ask for something in an email or a phone call. And then there are numerous emails that go back and forth to gather basically the same data every time. And so we'll be designing some forms for bulk edit stuff too, to make sure that James has the information he needs to do those. We are finally, after vacations and illnesses and equipment dying in various places, not ours, but other people's equipment dying, and then the people who are going to work on our equipment couldn't do it. We're finally going to swap the firewall out in mid-November. So any of you that are working from home and we have added your home IP into the system, we are going to flush every home IP out of the system, which is fine. That just means the day we do that, you're going to have to either open a help desk ticket or call RSA and say, hey, I can't connect, please add my home IP. And the reason why we need to do this is we have thousands and thousands of IP addresses for people working at home. And those are not the IP addresses you currently have. So some people's home IP addresses change fairly frequently, and we may have 50 home IP addresses for you. That is a big security hole. We don't want that. The other thing we're doing is we're going to be asking libraries for you to send us your current IPs, and we're going to flush any IPs for your library that are not listed in the survey that you give us for the same reason. We have not cleaned the IPs out of the firewall in, I don't know, 10 years maybe, because we don't know what IPs you're using. And so this is all part of security. It's a brand new firewall. We're porting over as much as we can, but there will be, many of you will not notice anything. Some of you will have to call in and give us your new IPs. And it's a pretty quick process on our end to get those added. So it'll be a morning of pain and then it'll be done with. Big new project for reports is coming. We are going to start replacing the Symphony end of month reports that all of you hate. The one that has the 20 some odd page explainer document that still doesn't make sense even after you read the explainer document as to why we have these reports that answer questions that the state no longer asks. So we're going to start replacing these in December. We're going to start off with user reports. So, number of users registered, number of users that were expired, or number of and monthly, active users, and an active user is someone who's done something in the last 6 months. Things like that. We're going to come up with a group of user reports. We'll send them out. We'll see how we do. If we miss the mark, you will let us know. In January, we hope to release a bunch of hold type reports to give you more information and detail on holds filled, holds outstanding, that kind of thing. Those are two areas that will allow us to work with smaller report sets to get better at setting up mass reports going out of Blue Cloud Analytics at the end of the month. And so we'll cut our teeth on those, and then we'll start working on more of the circulation type, meaty reports. So there will be a reports committee meeting in February. We were going to do it in January, but it turns out there's not a good time to do it in January. It's the first of the year and everybody's busy. So there will be a reports committee meeting in mid-February. If you would like to be on that committee and help us design new end of month reports, we're actually doing it this time, unlike the last time we got the committee together. We've got better technology and it actually works now. So we're going to be doing that over time. We had some anniversaries this quarter. I've been here 16 years. Some days it feels like 30, other days it feels like 2. It's amazing how that works. Rhonda's been with us for 9 years. Doug's been with us for 5, and Anna has been with us for 3 years. So congratulations to all of us. The audit for RSA was completed, and as per usual, no write-ups, no journal entries, nothing negative no comments really of any kind from our auditors. This is the second year we've used CLA in Peoria for our audit. They do a very thorough audit, very in-depth, every process, how you manage checks, how you audit checks, how you get checks from the bank into your bank account, how things are recorded in the system. They look at each and every part of that. So they look very deeply. Rails Finance is incredible. They do a great job. I can't remember the last time we had a note from an auditor about something that Rails Finance had done. I think it was like maybe 2013, and that was more, no, it's 2012, because it was more along the lines of it wasn't the finance had done something wrong. It was that the auditors didn't like the fact that we had too much money in a bank account that was over the FDIC insurance limit. So Rails Finance is fabulous. They do great work for us. I'll be visiting probably Jenny and Alyssa to get tax forms signed and sent off next week, or potentially Friday. So that's all good news. As you all know, we upgraded RSA CAT. The facets are fixed. And when I say the facets are fixed, they worked before, but they didn't work the way we expected them to work. They now work the way we expect them to work. So if you are looking at a search filter that displays only your library or potentially only your juvenile items, the facet counts only show your items and the counts of them. So the one downside of this upgrade is it did break the item details sorting. So single libraries, when you click on item details, it used to be that your items were listed at the top of that list. That is currently broken. Libraries with branches, it used to be that the main library's items were at the top, but then the rest of the branches were down below. It's kind of a blessing for you now because all your branch materials are in one spot. Eventually that'll get fixed. So when Erica was talking about cleanup of cataloging, you can actually use RSA CAT to do that a little bit. So here's an example search on the left-hand side of the screen. I did a blank search, just leave the search box blank and click go. And whatever this search limit is what you will get counts for. So this particular search is for all of Quincy Public Library's physical items. There are 142,662 titles were returned. Of those, 104,918 were books. Now, if you remember the old counters that used to be here, they stopped at about 4,000, 3,500 to 4,000. That was as many things as they could count. And anything above that, it didn't know anything about. These are the actual counts of books, large print books, movies, audiobooks, music at Quincy, cataloged in the system. And as you can see, every facet and everything in a facet now has a count. That is all new. And you can dig into these facets and start seeing if there are maybe oddities in your collection. For example, I've opened up the genre. I clicked on View All right here, and that opens up and gives you counts for every code you're using. And so in this case, here's the genre on this side. 78,000 things don't have a item cat 4 genre assigned to them. Oh, okay, that's fine. They've used 12,610 mystery genres. I don't know if that's right, but I'm sure Quincy does, right? And if you keep scrolling down, you'll get down to all the onesie twosies even that you have cataloged in the system. So it might be that you'll scroll down, scroll, and you'll get to the end of this list, and all of a sudden you're seeing, I only have one or two of these. Why is that? Oh, it's because we made cataloging errors, right? So we assigned the wrong code to this for whatever reason. Or many years ago, that was a code we were using, but it's not a code we use now. And so, hey, let's click on that and limit the catalog and I'll get the title and then we can just look it up and fix it. So it's kind of a quick way to look at your collection. It's a quick way to drill down into certain things. So for example, if you want to see every movie you own, you would do a blank search. Then you would just click in movie here and it will limit to just the movies that you own. And then you could say, well, maybe I want to just know the movies that I own in the year of 2020. Well, then you could click 2020. Boom, you're going to be looking at every movie you own from 2020. That did not work before. To be bluntly honest, it does work now. So you can use these facets now the way you think they should have worked. Even better, if you change to the ebooks tab across the top of the search results or the all RSA search results, the counters here get updated because you've changed your search limit. So now when you click on here, these formats are going to change and they're going to give you the counts of the ebooks, the full ebook counts. If you go to RSA wide, it's going to show 1 million results and it'll tell you how many book titles we have of that 1 million results, right? So it works the way you think. If you click the drop down and change it to juvenile, you should see your formats and your reading levels change to just the 37,000 juvenile items. And then your facets will be just reflecting juvenile stuff. So this is something that has been on my complaint list since before this was our live and only catalog. So it finally got fixed and I'm very happy about it. And as a reminder, please, if you have not updated your workflows this month, please do it. Well, last month, you didn't do it last month. Please upgrade your workflows. You can send an email to the help desk if you need some help with that. James will help you out. We did do a minor Symphony update last month. Not many changes for you guys, just some bug fixes and some things that make our life a little bit easier on the back end. All right, we also fixed the RSA support site, the current RSA support site. A lot of you were having problems downloading files from our support site, and that was because the files did not live on the server. And depending on the version of the browser and the browser, like Chrome versus Firefox versus Internet Explorer or Edge, and the version of the browser and potentially what settings you had set for the browser and what extensions you were using in the browser, many of you could download files, no problem, and many of you could not download a file to save your life. So we think we have that fixed now. We moved every file onto the RSA CAT server. Then we went back through and we hit almost all of the pages. We may have hit all the pages. We may have missed a page or two, but we had to go through and manually change all the links to now point at the new place where the files are stored. But if you go to the parameters page or the catalogers page or the member services cert page or the monthly reports page, and you click on any of those files, it's now being served from the same server that the page is on. It's all under the same certificate. So every browser in the world should be happy with our files and let you download them now. So again, if you run across a file link and it says you can't download it, please let us know what file link and what page and file name that was, and we'll go back and get that fixed for you. But this has been a problem for a couple of months, and it took us a while to figure out the best way to fix it so that it would work for all the browsers. And basically that was the most painful possible way because it made us have to touch every file on the system. We were going to do a real quick screen sharing for the new RSA support site. I'm going to skip that in the name of time. Tony has a group that meets on a monthly basis. Take a look at your inbox for email announcing when the next date is. And you can see the new site. Tony says the next meeting is December 7th at 2 p.m. Is that out on L2 so people can register? If it's not, we'll make sure it is. Thank you.
They can register. You have to be logged into L2.
Yeah. So log into L2. You can register for that meeting on December 7th, and you can give us guidance on the layout and some navigation things. We've got the site now in enough of a workable state that you can actually give valid feedback. So please help us out with that, because in the end, we're really trying to make sure that we get things laid out. Not only one way of navigation, but a couple of different ways to navigate depending on what your role in the library is. If you're a director, there should be a handbook for you. If you're a CERC person, what you need is on the CERC page, you can just jump straight there. So we're trying to design it to have several different ways to get to any piece of information. Okay, and real quick on the strat plan, I think most of what we've done you all saw. User group discussion has proved very popular. We went a little long today, but not nearly as long, which almost leads me to think that maybe we need an in-between users group meeting that's just like a roundtable for any items to be discussed. We were doing that early in pandemic days. That might be something that users group wants to think about doing. And it would not be something that we would run. We would provide a Zoom link and we'd have a couple people in the meeting to answer questions, of course, but that would be basically another networking group opportunity for you. We will continue to have more focused discussions during users group because we do find your feedback very, very helpful. Again, we're making new forms. We're working on that new site. Library to library mentoring. Again, that's every time, you know, we have a governance meeting that gets brought up, and that's something that really needs to, it's got to come more from you than from us. We can help facilitate a little bit, but we can't make you mentor. This we have all talked about. Lots of things. Oh, one of the need to look for ways to reduce staff time. A lot of what we're seeing now, and a lot of the larger areas where my staff is spending more time doing things than we probably need to, revolves around library setup, right? How are my items being searched, and how are my holds rules set up, and when do my notices go out, and why can't I place holds on items that I own that are sitting on my shelves? And it's because for years and years, RSA has always let everybody do whatever they wanted as much as humanly possible. And what we found over time is that as directors have moved on, the people who came behind them, the staff and the new directors, and in some cases it's 3 or 4 different directors have come and gone over the years, that the new people don't understand how the system is working in the context of their library. And because there are not standards, we cannot point them to a document that says, oh, well, your notices are this, this, and this, or your hold rules are X, Y, and Z based on that's how everybody does it, or this is why you're using the item types you're using, because those standards don't exist. So part of what we're trying to do is we're working with libraries who are new to RSA and are doing projects where they're redoing a lot of things in their library, is trying to start getting some standards where when a library asks a question on why I can't place a hold on my shelf, it's not because they're one of the 8 libraries in our system that does not allow on-shelf holds. We as staff don't remember that that's a thing, and it's not someplace that you can easily see. And so it takes a long time to figure out that's why your holds aren't working. So standardization will reduce staff time, much in the fact that, you know, it's easier to deal with a library when walking into the situation. You have a pretty good idea of what that library is doing and using the system for. And I will say RSA needs to do a better job of reminding every library how their settings are done. And we're going to probably start having some kind of quarterly review process, or, you know, semi-annual review process where, you know, maybe this quarter we'll send you circ rules to review, and next quarter maybe it's hold rules to review, or maybe those 2 things come together, and then, you know, 3 months later we send you this. These are all the cataloging, you know, parameters you're using, and then 3 more months, these are all the user types you're using, and just please review these, and if something looks odd to you, let us know. And that also will help along with a lot of those questions of, why is my library doing this? Well, if you look at these things, maybe we can help with that. Just some reminders here on operating efficiency. We do have that open position. We are continuing to add online and video training. There was a whole back to school group of videos that were added shortly after the last users group. If you've got new staff or staff who want a very quick review, those are great little videos to look at. They're not very long, they're very focused, and that'll help you, especially if you've got a new staff member. Hey, sit down and watch these series of videos, and you'll actually see workflows do simple tasks like adding a patron or checking an item out or processing a hold, that kind of thing. We continue to do Zoom visits, and starting in May 2020, we're going to go back to in-person meetings. So the May, the August, and the November users groups will probably do in person at a library. We can't do them here in our building because our building's not big enough anymore. So we'll do them in a member library. And then we'll also start looking at potentially other meetings or trainings or whatever happening in libraries when it makes sense, and when we can, make sure that the time spent driving to and coming back from a library is not going to be longer than the meeting and or the training that it takes to provide for it, unless there's a large group that we can meet a bunch of expectations for. And we've been doing system upgrades pretty much nonstop. And I said 2.5 hours. I will turn it back over to you with 2 minutes to spare because we started a little late.
Okay. I am going to encourage everyone to put something in the chat. If you have any bragging that you'd like to do, or if you would like to give a shout out to someone else who has been super awesome. I will take this opportunity to give a shout out to Alice at the Peoria Public Library main branch, and Gina at Fond du Lac, Alyssa at Morton, and Jeff at Pekin. They were all kind enough to host me and my leadership team earlier this week when we did a library field trip day. I highly recommend library field trip days. They're fantastic. We took about 3/4 of a day, and we went around to those libraries, including the new RSA building as well. And we looked around, we got some new ideas, we heard what they did and what we could possibly do differently. So kudos to those folks. And Beth has put something in the chat here. Thank you so much, Beth. So I hope everyone takes a minute to look at that and follow that link. Again, if anyone else has anything, please put it in the chat. So I think the last thing that I'm going to mention, Kendall, I don't know if you have that on. Okay, yes. Okay, folks, managers and directors, please prick up your ears. This is something that you're going to be hearing more about pretty soon. You're going to be receiving yet another survey. I'm sorry for all these surveys, but think of it this way. Someone really wants to know your opinion. And the topic now is hiring difficulties. And a lot of you might just be laughing or rolling your eyes or something like that. But sincerely, I sincerely want you to know that between just in general, me and RSA, we would like to gather some information from you, from the RSA members, regarding the difficulties that you have had hiring professional positions, really in the last 3 years, even before COVID. We all know that there's a hiring difficulty right now during the tail end of a pandemic, and as we're entering an endemic. But we actually want to talk about pre-COVID times as well. The general discussion that I have heard ever since since I came down here to the RSA area to almost 3 years ago was that it's hard to get professionals to move down here. It's not impossible, but it's hard. We get people who complain that we're not Chicago. We get people who don't want to drive. We get people who blah, blah, blah. I actually want you to think about those instances that you have experienced when you're hiring someone and they say no at the last minute, or you can't even get anyone qualified to apply. Some situation like that. I look for this survey coming out soon, and I want that information, please. The reason is that I, and between me and Kendall and probably some other RSA staff members, we want to bring this data to Rails and ask for their assistance in funneling library professionals or other professionals that libraries might hire downstate. And you might laugh at me, but I'm going to try, folks. That's what my goal is. But in order to say, we've got a problem, we need your help, I need a bit of data and information behind that. If you have specific comments or questions or concerns about my plan, email me directly and I'll tell you, more specifics, but please look out for that survey. Patty tells us in chat that Amanda Schaefer won a grant for Midwest Central School Libraries. Congratulations, Amanda. Thank you for sharing that, Patty. Again, thank you everyone for staying on this long. If you have anything else to suggest, agenda ideas for February, please send an email to the help desk. You can send it directly to me and I'll make sure it gets to the right person. And thank you, Kendall, for reminding us that in May, the goal is to meet in person.
And we need a place to do that.
Yes, indeed. If you would like to volunteer to host this wonderful group of people in May. And as you can see, the date and time are already set. Oh, we have an offer right here from Jenny.
We'll take many offers.
Yes,
Whoever
thank
can
you.
provide the nicest donuts.
Thank you, Jenny. I am sure Anna or Kendall will follow up with you on your offer. If you notice that Kendall or Anna in the chat. Oh, and Jane tells us that they have a new bagel shop in Galesburg. Wow, that's quite the temptation. Well, I am done with my topics, Kendall, and I have definitely gone over your 2-minute allotment. So sorry about that. But everyone, sincerely, thank you very much for staying put all the way through to the end. And again, if you have any questions or concerns, some of these topics we really, just flew through, then email, please email. Seeing no big questions, concerns, or, cries for help, I will take this moment to adjourn the meeting officially. It is adjourned. See everyone next time. Thank you again
everybody.
for your time.